Welcome to the Ignite the Day podcast hosted by Rhema UK and Ireland, igniting your day with revelation, inspiration, and encouragement, helping you to live the life that God has called you to.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Ignite the Day podcast today. Today we have an amazing guest with us. We've got Matthew Beemer, or Matt Beemer from Club 1040. Matt's a good friend, and his wife Julie are good friends of Michelle and myself. We've known them, I don't know now, probably must be close to 30 years in that sort of ballpark. It's been quite a while. And Matt and Julie are an amazing couple who run a missions organization called Club 1040. They've planted churches, they've established Bible schools. They're taking the gospel into some really difficult parts of the world. And it's just such a privilege to have Matt on the podcast today. So Matt, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. It's going to be fun. I look forward to having a conversation and pray that it has some points that bless people as we go to.
I'm absolutely sure that it will, knowing all the wisdom and experience that is in you, Matt. I've kind of got an opener question for you that to get us going today, and it's why missions? How did you get into doing missions, and where did it all start?
The simple answer, of course, is just like with you or anybody that's called to ministry. It's you sense that call and you obey that call. But the real story is it's a clumsy story. And I do like to, in review of things and looking back and kind of analyzing some of these things, both to learn myself and to try to help other people learn. In fact, with my kids, I've realized that exploring or trying to discover the purpose that we have in life is a lot like a treasure hunt. And, the treasure, like the best of all treasures, is that, the gold under the rainbow is discovering what you were born to do, what God created you for. And I always would teach our children, when I talk to them about that, I'm like, that treasure map is inside each one of us. It's inside you, not on the outside. But things on the inside will point towards landmarks on your journey, just like in a treasure map you see, here's the mountains, turn here, here's this, turn here, the palm tree, take 10 paces or whatever, something like that. And looking back, I can see, very early days as I was growing up. I grew up in the U.S. in the western part of the state of Michigan. And behind my house, there was a train track. Like literally, like maybe 100 meters behind my house is a train track. Then behind that was miles of, land and rivers and all kinds of great things to have fun with as a kid. So I would do everything I could to try to experience adventure. And, like to the point where we would jump, like as we got older and fast enough to as the train had to slow down a little bit behind my house because there was a road, we would run and jump on the back and ride it downtown when we were like, I don't know, maybe like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And our parents wouldn't know where we are riding the back of this train. We would jump off with no thought about how we're going to get home. It's like 3 miles down the tracks and have a pocket full of pennies that we could buy some penny sweets with, and then have to, kind of like literally Stand By Me, kind of, if you know that movie, walk on the tracks on the way back, jumping off of railroad bridges into the rivers. All those things was like my childhood. I would get so disappointed. I would be like, today I'm going to explore and I'm going to go to places I've never been before. And I would go and try to literally get lost in the remoteness of the woods and jungles and stuff, not jungles literally, but in my mind, 10-year-old kid's mind, have a backpack, have a thermos of water, and just try to get lost. And if I could be lost for days, that would have been a great thrill to me. And I would be so disappointed when I would go to places I've never been before and have that thrill of that experience, and then suddenly come out to a road someplace that was 10 miles from my house and think, I don't know which way to go. Should I go right or left? I'll go left and just see what happens, and start walking on the road. And then eventually I'd be like, oh man, I recognize where I am, So the great disappointment. So those are, to me, looking back, those are kind of like little landmarks in my treasure map journey. Then as I got older, course, I played football. I did well with that, American football, and then also did very well in architecture competitions. So I was going to go to university for football and architecture degree. And even looking at architecture, what I do now is God shows us something that doesn't exist. I visualize that, and then we try to, envision other people, show them. That's what an architect does. He takes a place where there's no land, discovers the plan, and then communicates that plan to people. I know Rick Renner one time was talking about the apostolic calling, and he really relayed that to architect. And in a lot of ways, I identified with that. So those are like little landmarks on the way. But eventually, I had an experience with God that brought me. So instead of going to play football at a pretty prominent university in the U.S., American football, and do architecture at that same university, I ended up going and playing flag football at Bible college. Yeah. But even then I didn't know. Oh, the other thing is my sister saw this hunger for adventure. My sister's 2 years younger than me. And she had her life more aligned with God at the time than I did. And she saw me, I got into trouble a little bit with the police and stuff like that too. Again, trying to, just doing things that would bring adventure into my life and doing the wrong things to do that. And she sent off for a packet for a youth mission organization that, without me knowing, and back then it was, we're talking about, 35 years ago, it was a VHS tape, promotional tape in a whole glossy magazine packet. And I ended up, I was like, this I didn't know you could do that. So I'm like, this sounds great. And so I applied for it, didn't know where the money was going to come from to go. I was probably about 17 at that time, ended up going to Nicaragua and Honduras. And by that time I'd started to align my life more with God. And so I had applied to the Bible college, and I actually found out I was accepted to Bible college when I was in Honduras. And even then, I didn't know if I was supposed to go to missions for sure or not, into that as a lifetime journey. But I just kept taking these steps, doing what I knew to do, obey at that time, and then God would, share more and more with me. And over time, looking back, I realized, okay, yeah, He was leading me the whole time, even unconsciously. And some of those natural things that He created in me for adventure and some of these things, which I think all kids have to a degree, especially little boys, but it was, quite heightened in my life. I can see in architecture and these things, I can see it pointed to some of the things that I'm doing and living out today for sure. But, God was able to get me in a place where I gave manifestation to that in His will, as opposed to just doing it out of natural ambition.
So, there's some amazing stuff in there that we could pick up on. But to summarize that, what I'm hearing, the lesson I'm hearing come out of what you've just described as that sort of journey through of discovery, discovering yourself, adventure and all that kind of stuff. There's a lesson for all of us there in looking at those things that, I don't know, for want of a better phrase, give us a kick. That inspire us, that excite us, and thinking about how does that apply to what God's called me to do in life? Because I kind of, you just got me reflecting that so many people, they get stuck in a job or a role or a situation that they don't enjoy. You talk to people, they've spent years working a job that they don't enjoy. And it comes down to so often that they're not doing what they were made to do. They're not, those natural things that excite them and they get passionate about aren't being used in that role, in that job, in that position, whatever it is. So this idea that actually we can look at our own lives and those things that excite us and start understanding perhaps a little bit about what God made us for is really quite powerful, isn't it?
It's exceedingly powerful. And it's one of the things that, like, if you were to put like high priorities, what I try to encourage everybody to do who God brings into my sphere of influence is help them connect with their life God designed purpose. Because that, the word you used over and over just now was joy. And scripturally speaking, Paul finished his course with joy. Jesus, for the joy that was in front of him, was able to endure the cross. There's a connection between understanding one's purpose and joy that you cannot get that kind of joy any other way. And I remember for myself personally, it's kind of a funny story, really. I was in Liverpool. We just moved to Liverpool. And, the practical steps behind that were, I won't go into too much detail for sake of time, but the steps were something like this is I was drawing, my wife and I graduated from Bible college. We got married, went back and started serving, putting our hand to the plow in the local church where I had come out of, doing whatever was needed, working jobs just so that we could spend as much time as we could at the church, helping the church, so not paid by the church or anything like that, volunteering like 40 hours a week. We're newly married. We didn't have any kids. That's what we did. We loved it. And I, in my own time, would draw houses, and I could draw like a house a week, and that house then would kind of help to cover the bills. And Julie was working her job. And one time I had found a piece of property, and we've been married for a couple of years. I thought we're gonna build a house, this perfect piece of property. I can afford it. We'll buy it, build a house. And I was actually drawing the plans. This is back before computers. So I was literally with graphite on paper drawing the plan and like refining it, about to send it off to the lumber yard to get it costed out. And then I just was like, threw my pencil down on the drawing table. And I remember thinking, God, why do I feel like I'm wasting my time? And in my heart, I heard his response was, you are. And so I'm having this internal conversation with the Lord then in this room all by myself, where the drawing board is almost the same size as the room. The room is so small, second bedroom of a little apartment we were in. And I'm like, but Lord, I can build this house. All the circumstances had aligned where I could build that house for, and this is not an exaggeration, for probably 60% of the total value of the house. So I'd have like 40% instant equity in it. And I'm like, God, the house isn't important to me. I'll build it and then sell it and go anywhere you want. And I'll have all this money in my pocket to do it. And he's like, the response was, you don't understand. You don't have time to build this house. And I'm like, I know it'd take me less than a year to build this house. And I'm like, that means I'm going to be somewhere else in a year. I need to find out where. And so that set me in the journey of discovery through prayer. And so I started going into the church office, which I was volunteering for at the time. I think maybe by then they were paying me a couple hours a week as like the church assistant, secretary type person. They never were willing. I was too young, 22 years old. They weren't willing to actually call me an assistant pastor. They didn't want to empower me that much. It was like secretary or assistant to the pastor or secretary or something. But anyway, so I would go in extra early before my office hours, and I would set a chair in front of a map that was in this small little sanctuary, about 150 people in the church. And I would just pray at that place, pray and pray out the plan. And it seemed like over time, the Lord led us to two things. It seemed like England became much more of the focus. And in fact, there was a family, a couple, that church had supported that family who lived in England, and their main responsibility was going to places that were closed countries from there. And everything about that seemed to ring true with me. And then I went into fact-finding phase, which is something I do, is I went and got all the times that guy had ever been through the church preaching, and I listened to all the sessions. And then the very last one, he says, it was Q&A time. He says, what I need more than anything is someone who can understand both the U.S. side and the UK side, help us develop an administrative side of things, but also understand the mission side of thing and all that. And I'm like, I could do that. And so this is back in days before email. So we wrote a 3-page fax after Julie and I prayed about it. And I'm cutting this longer story very short, and sent him this fax and said, basically, would you allow us, or would be interested in us coming and just serving and volunteering for you? So we did eventually do that. And we're there in Liverpool for 2 years. And then while we're in Liverpool, the Lord put in our heart to move to Manchester and pioneer the church. But that's sort of how we got started in the actual mission journey. But I was going to say something before I went off that sidetrack, and related to purpose. Yes. So towards the end of our time in Liverpool, Julie said she's going to go out and spend some time with a friend. And she's like, what are you going to do today? And I'm like, I don't know. We made a 2-year commitment and we're about halfway. Maybe I should just start praying about what we're going to do next. So I said, I'm just going to spend the day, just really like, just matter of fact. I'm just spend the day before the Lord and pray. And so I did that. And like, after praying things out for about 45 minutes, it was like, I sat down on my computer and wrote out 3 pages of what I felt like the Lord was speaking. And that became what eventually became the church that we pioneered in Manchester and all those things. And as I began to take steps towards, we wanted to finish strong where we were at serving there. But as we began to explore the vision for the steps to come, the joy that was so strong in my heart, I was like, I would come to a place, I'm like, I feel like this is what I was created for. I'm stepping into like the first phase of what I was born to do. And the joy that came with that was amazing. Well, parallel to that, again, remember, this is like when I was 24, 25 years old, very young, just had a new child, living in Liverpool, Upper Parliament Street, opposite the Anglican Cathedral. Could see that, and it was all lit up at night. A little tiny apartment. And England stays in the summertime light. It comes, it's like 4 a.m. and it's bright light, and it feels like it's light at 11 p.m. at night still. And I was sleeping like 2-3 hours a night, and I was like so just like I wasn't drinking a lot of caffeine, but I felt like I was on caffeine all the time. And I don't like running or anything like that. I get up and I go running, trying to get rid of this energy. I spend time praying, read my Bible. I mean, just whatever I did, I just was so energized. And at the same time, I'm beginning to have heart issues a little bit. Like my heart was beating in an erratic way. And after maybe 2 months of that, I told Julie, and she's like, man, you need to get that checked out. We just had a baby, like, I don't need you dying on me. So I went and I went through all these tests, and the doctor came in, looked at me strange, asked me some questions, went out and did some more conversations with people and stuff, came back in, and he's like, I've never seen this before in all my, and I'm like, what? Never seen what? And I started to get concerned. You don't like it when a doctor says something like that to you. And he says, no, you're okay. But he says, the only thing you're fine physically, he says, the only thing is it seems as though you have been like, you have all the symptoms of someone who is on like a continuous adrenaline rush. And he's like, it's like you're too happy. And I'm like, what do I do? Take a pill? I mean, what do I do about that? And, but that was directly linked to, and he's like, go running or something. I'm already doing that, but it was directly linked to the fact that I had this awareness that I was stepping into the thing I was created for. And the joy that came with that had no external circumstances connected to it. It wasn't based on anything outwardly. It was entirely internally. And it was so powerful that it literally changed, affected me in a physical way. And then I was reading scriptures around that time, and I read that scripture, for the joy that was before him, Jesus was able to endure the cross. And then it reminded me of the scripture of Paul, who finished his course with joy. And I'm like, that's the kind of joy the Bible's talking about, is that kind of joy, not a joy that comes from, whatever else, good things happen in life. It's connected directly to understanding you're stepping into that purpose of God has created you for. And so there would be times when life was, in England, when we were pioneering the church, it wasn't easy. We had several cars stolen at different times. We had all kinds of things happen that were challenging. We lived in a really rough area, but I would be in the midst of that, and I'd literally be walking down a rough street, and it would just come out of me to the point I actually vocalize. I'm like, I love my life. I absolutely love my life. And in the natural, if someone were to see my life from the outside, you have nothing, no furniture, no money, no, everything. It seems like it. They would be like, yeah, I don't know what, something's wrong with you. But it was always tied to that, walking in that purpose. And so I've, over the years, if it means relocating or moving or whatever, I always tried to protect the fact that I stay aligned with that, because I know that's where the joy is, and that strengthens me and empowers me to do what he calls me to do.
I mean, Matt, that is so powerful. And I regularly get people ask me, how do I find my plan? How do I find my calling? How do I find what God wants me to do? I'm struggling with it. I've struggled with it for years. And you've just in 10 minutes or so have kind of summed up your story, but it brings out some really powerful truths about how to find the calling of God in your life and how to stay in the calling of God in your life. And you've talked about, if I just try and summarize it a little bit, but you've talked about finding those things that excite you, those things that could be indicators of the type of thing that you might be created to do. You've talked numerous times about getting in prayer, time in prayer, seeking the Lord, and getting before His face and just saying, God, what is it? What is it you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? And then you've talked about the joy. And I think that joy, that is so powerful because, as I said before, so many people are doing things and living lives and in jobs that give them no joy, give them no sense of fulfillment, no sense of purpose. And yet there is a calling, there is a purpose that brings that ultimate satisfaction, that joy that isn't dependent on whether I have the right car or I live in a big home or, all these kinds of outward kind of whatever the word is, things, but is something that comes from the inside. And for me, that's such a powerful story that just kind of brings to life, what I think a lot of people are trying to walk through and missing out in their, in trying to find their calling. So, thank you for taking us through that, because that is really powerful, and I think that'll speak to some of the people that are viewing this podcast. I'm going to ask you a question. What again, to help those that are viewing this podcast, what would you say the greatest lesson that you've learned while on the mission field is?
Well, I mean,
one
there's
thing,
so many.
just one thing.
Yeah, there's so many, but what I would say is okay. So something that I might have learned that others might not have been exposed to in learning is because of the different places we've lived, is the fact that any people all over the world are people first. And that means hurting people simply want to stop hurting. And the needs of people, in essence, are similar wherever they are. Yes, things are culturally different. Yes, the way they live their life may be expressed in different ways. But at the very root, for example, people who are spiritually separated from God, whose life, that's their greatest need. People who are hurting in life for all kinds of felt reasons, when that pressure is removed, they feel relief. And so I would say that's one of the things that I've learned that would be across all the different experiences we've had. Yeah, is that people are people, and hurting people they want to stop hurting, and anything you can do. The source of removing that pressure is the spiritual source. We know that, and if you can help them understand that, then you can help them.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Yeah, people are people. I love that. And I guess that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about reaching people.
Yeah, and then I guess linked to that from a ministry perspective and being effective in ministry, the thing that's kind of a connecting point that would come to mind is people. Everything happens at the speed of trust, and so that points back to relationship, and it takes time to be able to build those trust. So, over the years, I'm super cause driven, and like I don't want to do anything unless it has a really intentional purpose attached to it. And over the years, I've learned just the value of that relational side of things is so important in order to build that platform from which to do things together. I still feel like with me and my personality, it's not the same with everybody. With me and my personality, which is cause driven, I used to say to people when I was pastoring church in England, I'm like, if you really want to get to know me and spend time with me, then, get in this ditch and start helping me dig this ditch. And together we'll learn, we'll grow. And it's kind of like how they talk about the bonds that are made during war in the foxholes of war, that like nothing's as strong as that. So that's, for me, the way I build relationships the most is in the doing of the things that God's called us to do together, bringing two people together in a common purpose and doing that together. That's where real relationship for me thrives. I'm not someone that can do relationship very easily just for the sake of relationship, other than if it's core family and things like that. But the value that I have for the importance of relationship related to trust building is been highly, highly honed over the last 3 4 decades.
And on that note, then, so what would you say if things move as fast as the speed of trust? And you've talked about relationships, but how do you build trust? Dig into that a little bit for me.
Well, I mean, statistical research shows there's three major components for building trust, and it's like a stool with three legs. If any one of those legs is missing, it'll topple over. So one of those is being authentic, being real. Like people trust people they think are authentic and real more than like the car salesman idea or the person that's just trying to get something out of somebody, that kind of idea. The other one is empathy. Do I believe that person really, really cares for me? If I believe someone cares for me, my wife, I trust because I know she cares for me almost more than she cares for herself. So I have extreme levels of trust towards her. And if I understand that that person really, truly cares for me, I'm going to trust them more. And you think about God, it says, for he first loved us. He doesn't ask us to trust him. And that's one of the things where like blind faith, I always have a little bit of a problem with that expression. I understand the intent behind it and it's the truth. But I'm like, yeah, not really what God teaches. He teaches, let me love you and then trust me back in response. For he first loved us, therefore we love him back. We trust him back. And I actually think that's when the scripture says that faith works by love. I actually think it's not just faith works by loving others, which is a truth. Yes, it's real. But faith works by understanding God's love towards you is a big part of what I believe that verse. It works by love, but under what kind of love? Understanding God's character in his love towards us. And it's the same with any kind of element of trust with our other relationships, working or otherwise. If you really believe someone wants the best for your own life, you're going to trust them more than someone that you think they're out for themselves. So, empathy would be one. Then the third one would be if a person is strategic from a leadership perspective. If you don't think somebody's very strategic in the way, and they could be strategic in their mind, but how they communicate things is very illogical. And so it doesn't gender trust in that person. It's like, that doesn't even make sense, and what world is that person living in? But if you have those three components operating, the competency of trust will actually statistically can be increased. So for example, if it's broken, trust is broken in some way, try to assess which of those three. Mm-hmm. And some leaders, they're not very strategic. They're strategic thinkers more, but less experience on how to articulate something in a strategic way or in a rational way or a succinct way. So, in that case, get somebody in your team that can help you communicate things in a logical way, in a strategic way. And you and I know leaders who have had people who have been like their senior associates that have literally written their messages to help them take the vision and the thought and the truth they're trying to communicate and make it succinct and make it into something that they could then, it's more logical in the way it's communicated. So yeah, those three things would be pretty key to building trust.
Really powerful, and doing it through relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of those things, you can't see if somebody empathizes with you without time with them and without relationship with them. And it's not like, hey, I empathize with you. Hey, I'm pretty strategic. And also, like, just like, okay, now we're done with that. Let's move on. That's not how it works.
No, absolutely. All right. I'm going to pivot the conversation a little bit, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. I'd like to explore, so you landed in the UK back in the mid 90s, and that was, done short-term missions before, but that was really you landing on the mission field as a full-time missionary, right? Since then, you've transitioned out of the UK into Africa. You've established Bible schools in Africa, which are just exploding over there from what I can see at the moment. You've transitioned out of Africa, you've transitioned into the Middle East, and are planting churches and Bible schools and so on. That's quite an unusual story for most of us, I think. Most of us can kind of see, someone planting a church, maybe then going and planting another church here and maybe another church there, or they plant a church and they stay there for 40 years or whatever. I know that when you left the UK, I had people we both know say to me, "What on earth is Matt doing? He's mad. I mean, why is he leaving a great church in Manchester to go to Africa? People are leaving Africa to come to England. They're not going from England to Africa. And they couldn't understand what you were doing." And I think what's amazing is that time has kind of proved out that you were following the call, following the journey, going on the right path that God had you on, because the fruit of that speaks for itself. But a lot of people won't understand what you do. So I kind of want to give you a little bit of an opportunity to talk about what you do in its broadest sense, and maybe just impart to our viewers why that's really important and where that comes from, biblically speaking.
This is part 1 of a 2-part episode series. Make sure that you're subscribed to us on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you watch your podcasts to catch episode 2. See you then. Thank you for joining us for the Ignite the Day podcast. We hope that we've ignited your day with revelation, inspiration, and encouragement, and that we're helping you to live the life that God has called you to.